So you're watching this episode, you're a medical doctor, but somewhere along the line, you've thought about maybe doing a move to the business world, to the corporate world. Well, in this episode, we're having a very special guest on Money and Medicine, where we are going to discuss what that would look like, what were some of the moves that made Dr. Mathew's change. And we hope you enjoyed this episode. If this is the very first time that you are watching Money and Medicine, I want you to go to our website, www.moneyandmedicine.co.za, where we've had interviews with thought leaders in the markets, where we discuss different topics, and we show you some tips and trades that you can apply to your profession today. Right up next.
This episode of Money and Medicine is proudly sponsored by the PPS Health Professions Indemnity. For more information on PPS, please do go on our website.
So, Dr. Chris Mathew, thank you so much again for making your way to the studio today. Chris, from my side, I think I've been working with you for probably 4 or 5 years now. I think when we met, you were still at ComServe. You were at the Gen.
Yep.
And a lot of stuff has happened since then. You finished your MBBCH through WITS. You were class rep. We just spoke about that. You then went on and you did your MBA at Oxford. And that was always the goal, right? That was always the vision. How did you get into the business, the world of business? What made you sort of change your mind from clinical to business?
Sure. Thanks, Stefan. Thanks, Vanna, for having me as well. So, no, it definitely wasn't the goal.
Okay.
So life always has other plans. So I always knew I wanted to go out of clinical medicine. I knew I'd do an MBA at some point. Oxford was a blessing in disguise. The decision was to move out of clinical medicine once I finished specializing. Do the typical conveyor belts, do medicine, internship, ComServe, get into specialization, and then eventually, then you consider non-clinical work. As I got through ComServe, I realized actually it might be a chance for me to do something sooner and maybe take the leap a bit earlier than I'd planned. I think a lot of the frustration that you experience in public sector starts coming to the fore when you're in internship in ComServe, and it helped me to just sort of take the leap. So I'd always wanted to go into hospital administration, hospital management.
Okay. That
was always my initial dream, and I joke now, but it was very much my light at the end of the tunnel was I wanted to become CEO of Barra.
Okay.
So the idiom that people often say is Barra does. You don't change Barra, Barra changes. and look, it changes all of us.
Yeah.
But my goal was to be the person that did change Barra.
Yeah.
It was an important goal. It was an important light to sort of guide me to where I wanted to go. And that's what prompted me to take that first step out. And then there's a bit more of a journey to it from there.
Awesome. So Chris, just before we jump in, today you work for one of the biggest private groups, hospitals in South Africa. And I read something that you guys, part of the vision is to be part of a group that's going to like digitalize fully operational, a digital operation. What does that exactly mean?
Sure. So very, very proud and honored to be part of a group that has taken digitization to the fore of its company strategy. So I'm part of Netcare, and we're busy digitizing all of our hospitals and all of our divisions actually. So I'm primarily working in the hospital division, and we're implementing an electronic medical record. So effectively digitizing what we've done in paper. So your ICU charts, your blood results, orders, prescriptions, everything from start to finish is fully digitized. Awesome. Something I dreamed about as a student, as internship, even trying to do a little thing here or there, but never thought it'd be a reality. So to be part of the project, it's been a great honor, but more than that, to actually see it come to fruition, to actually see you walk into a hospital, you walk into a ward, you don't see a single piece of paper. You come to an ICU bed, you don't see you have these massive ICU charts. It's just gone. All you have is an iPad. And on that iPad, you have everything. Instead of these boxes of files, it's all there in front of you. So it's been incredible to watch that journey unfold. It is core to our strategy is digitization. So we talk about digitally enabled care, patient health and care that's digitally enabled and data-driven. And that's the core of our strategy. But fundamentally, I think the most important part has always been about the patient care and how we can actually deliver better and safer care. And now it's just enabled through technology.
Oh, awesome.
And Chris, that vision to create this digitalization, specifically in the medical space, that basically started when you were at Barra. I think the struggles that you guys had in the public sector. I've looked at your CV on LinkedIn and I've seen, was that where that sparked the idea to go to Oxford and study an MBA? Or where did the MBA come in?
Yeah, so I think when you're looking at a way to get out of medicine, and you're looking at your other options, you're trying to see what else is out there. So I think all of us, or a lot of us that are considering that route, you start having conversations, start talking to people, and an MBA looks like the easiest way to get there. So maybe the advice I give to people is saying, why should you consider an MBA? And there's various reasons, and there's typically the reason that you'd look at an MBA is, one, you're trying to change career paths, and it's an easy way to change sectors completely because it gives you a more generalized skill set, and especially as a doctor, that's an easy way to make the step out. Okay. And there's an easy way for you to make the step out from clinical medicine and into the business sector, or any other sector for that matter, because those generalized skills. The other part is if you're looking to change geographies, and if you're looking to broaden your network. And those are my 3 goals looking at the MBA. So the MBA, for those reasons, was always a priority or a goal, but not necessarily directly to do an MBA. It was just what that would achieve for me in the process. My goal was to become hospital manager. And to become hospital manager, I realized I tried to do a few projects, tried to digitize a few processes, even looked at my internship process, did a pilot with WITS and Department of Health to actually try and digitize the application process for internship, which has now become digitized. Yes. Not necessarily through our own endeavors, but we at least helped to sort of prompt a few of those discussions with the DOH and another NGO that actually runs it now, who I actually ended up working for at one point, called HISP. So it's great to see these things happen. I can't take credit for it, but to at least see that that's where the journey started and eventually happened. And that process of testing that project out, testing out that idea, that gave me a bit more exposure to what I can and what I can't do and where my shortcomings are. And when you realize those gaps and you try to move out of clinical medicine and you see those gaps, then you realize actually you need to find a way to plug those gaps. And the MBA is an easy way to do that. Okay, so that was, I guess, my final prompt to say, okay, I actually need to take the leap. I understand I don't have all the skills I need. I realize that I want to gain those skills. I want to make the move out of clinical medicine. And it all sort of comes together like that.
Chris, thanks for sharing that. I think what is some of the other, how do I put this? What are some of the other routes that someone can go? Because obviously it's either clinical, you went the business route. What are some of the other routes that people can go if they want to get out of the clinical side of things?
Sure. So I think the first thing I always say to everybody is what is your reason for moving out? It shouldn't be, okay, I just want to leave clinical medicine and that's what I've done. There's always a reason. Either you want to stay in healthcare, but you get frustrated by the public sector and you want to try and make a difference on a bigger scale. And that's 90% of people that leave, they generally have that as a reason. That's usually the sort of the prompt. Either there's a desire to make a difference on a bigger scale, or you felt the frustration in the public sector. Once you've identified what your goal is, then you can say, okay, what are my options to reach that goal? So for me, my goal was hospital manager. It's a goal I probably never realized, and I've maybe gone a different route now. But it was that initial light to guide me out and say, okay, I need to leave clinical medicine. Then with that in mind, you can say, okay, how can I actually achieve this? How do I become hospital manager? Where are the deficits in my skills or my knowledge I need to fill, and how do I then get to my goal at the end? So for me, that's why the MBA made sense. But other options could be just getting exposure to a non-clinical environment. It could be startups. It could be a consulting job. That's a typical common route, is to go into management consulting. So if you're working for any of the MBB, so that's McKinsey, Bain, BCG, or any of the big management consulting firms, it just gives you exposure to other aspects of the business world. It uses skills that are natural and inherent to doctors in terms of problem solving and how you're assessing those environments. So we have a lot of skills that are transferable. We don't realize it as doctors. We think all we can do is treat patients, but there's so much more that we learn in medicine that is transferable. And if you actually have the right environment to apply those skills, test it out, see what you like, see what you don't like, and you can start exploring a few other options. So those are, I think, maybe the two most typical routes, is looking for a non-clinical job and trying to do that, and seeing if that appeals to you, whether it be management consultant or something else, or a startup, or doing the MBA and then using that then as a segue and a leap or a diving board into wherever you want to go to next. Another option is actually just stay in clinical, but progress to a point where you get involved in some of the non-clinical aspects. So a lot of people also go through the I say conveyor belt, I don't mean it in a derogatory fashion, but it's just the typical route to say you'll go through internship, ComServe, specialization. Once you become a specialist, you then have the option to become a consultant, head of department. Some people become clinical or hospital managers from that point, or even get into the Department of Health. That's another route to go as well, or get into private sector. So we recently had somebody that joined our team, or I brought a team at Netcare, specialist anaesthetists, did his PhD in data science, did a master's, just done an enormous amount of research and has a wealth of experience and knowledge, very clinically orientated, but a big non-clinical aspect in terms of data science, and he's now joined Netcare in the corporate environment. So there's no one size fits all. There's no single recipe. You do have to customize it to what your needs, what your desires, and what your objectives are.
Okay. And I've seen that, and we actually have seen it through dealing with all these doctors over the years. We could see that after guys finish their internship, ComServe, they're getting to a point where I think, specifically talking about the public sector, they're getting frustrated with the system, where their passion might be clinical, because that's why they started medicine, but they're getting to a point where they want to make a difference, they want to streamline things, they want to make it a bit easier, and I think that's where the idea then gets created or gets sparked for them to take a different route outside clinical, also within medicine, maybe going to a corporate route, and specifically digitalization. We have a collaboration with WardWorks, which was an app that was launched in, I think it was 2020, if I'm not mistaken, where one of the doctors basically started this app specifically for the public sector, to manage patient files, to also get away from the paperwork, and to record all this data on an app, just to make it a little bit more streamlined. But we've seen that where more and more people want to make a career move almost outside of clinical, purely due to the frustration within the public sector. From your experience, Chris, going back to your early days making this move, what are some of the stumbling blocks, some of the hurdles that people face when they want to make these kind of moves?
I think for me, my biggest dilemma, I guess, was more of an ethical dilemma. You get into medicine with the idea that you're going to treat patients and you're there to save lives and be at the front line for the rest of your life. So that first step of saying, I'm going to leave clinical medicine, you spend 6 years, then 2, then 1, then maybe even more specialized. And you spend possibly a decade of your life dedicated to medicine. And then you think, okay, I'm now going to leave clinical medicine, and all of that's for nothing. And it's not for nothing. It gives you a foundation to do a different type of work, but it's not for naught. It definitely adds value, and it adds a skill set that is hard to perhaps quantify at that point in time, because all you've heard is that I'm learning to become a doctor to treat patients. You're not learning to work in the corporate environment, but those skill sets are transferable and are still valuable. So for me, that is probably the biggest one, is how do I let go of that clinical passion as such, and saying that I was always going to be a doctor, a clinician treating patients. And taking that leap is often the most difficult part. That's the part that people will always be on the fence. And, can I actually let go of this? No, it's fine. I'll go to corporate, but I'll still do clinical for 1 day a week, or I'll do half and half. And in reality, it's actually very difficult. You have to almost just take the leap and just do it. And some people do find a balance. I remember when I first joined Netcare, I wanted to do that. I said, no, I will only work 4 days a week, and I want to do at least 1 day a week of full clinical work, and then afterwards clinical work. And at a very clear no, you cannot do that. And with good reason, and I was naive and perhaps underestimated at the time, it would just been completely impossible. I wouldn't have had the chance to really immerse myself in this new environment and learn. So once you come to grips with that, I think doing the MBA was the first sort of stretch of that, or growing that distance between clinical and non-clinical, and eventually over time becomes a bit easier. But once you've accepted that and you said, made your peace with leaving clinical work, it does become much easier. That was probably actually my biggest stumbling block to start off with. And then from there, just actually saying, what do I do next? How do I leave? How do I get exposed from this non-clinical? There's always this dilemma of you can't get a job until you have experience, but you can't get experience until you have a job. So how do you get somebody to trust you to give you a job in a non-clinical environment when you have no non-clinical experience? And I've been very fortunate in that sense. I joined an NGO. I was doing my comm service, had a coffee chat with this person, that person. Just one chat led to another, and eventually I got offered a job working for an NGO looking at health informatics. Completely unplanned. I'd never even dreamed of anything of the sort. But I was in public sector looking at data quality. It was an incredible experience. Completely out of my depth, and I had to learn a whole job in a month, and then go into a project for the Department of Health and finish in 6 months before I went to my MBA. So it was a steep learning curve, but such a valuable learning curve. And then so I did the MBA, and then another master's in international health, and came out of that, and oh great, you've got 2 degrees from Oxford. That's awesome. Looks great in your CV, but I had 0 experience. And then another connection. I'd met somebody that I worked with at Joburg Gen. I met his wife who worked for Netcare. We had been chatting on LinkedIn and Facebook, and then she said, oh, Chris, I think I might have an opportunity for you. And then took a chance. They took a gamble on me and gave me a chance. And I think a lot of it is sometimes that, just being in the right place at the right time. But also there has been intentional effort. Networking is so critical in the non-clinical environment. Trying to see what's out there, meeting people, because there isn't one size fits all. Just try and put feelers out there.
I want to quickly just touch on something very important that you've mentioned is the ethical side of it, and the emotional side of making that transition from being just focused on clinical going to corporate. I can, to a certain extent, I can relate to what you've been saying. Or I also made a career move. By qualification, I studied law. I practiced as an attorney for a number of years, then went into the financial services. So I remember when I decided to leave law, it was also quite an emotional and ethical thing for me, because I thought to myself, listen, I've studied 5 years, I've done my articles, I'm now leaving the industry, going to do something not legal related, although there's still a certain amount of legal aspects into financial planning, but I'm no longer going to be an attorney. And I think medicine, to a certain extent, being a clinical doctor might be very similar, because there's a prestigious thing about it. I think how people perceive you to be a doctor, where your family looks up to you being a doctor. Was that something that you struggled with? That how did your family and friends and other people reacted to that decision? Because you're no longer being a doctor out there wearing scrubs, walking with a stethoscope around your neck. Was that a bit of a struggle, or not really in your case?
Yes and no. So, look, my family was always very supportive, my wife as well. I think they knew me well. They knew that the non-clinical side was always where I was going to end up. They could see it from an early sort of point in my career. In med school, I'd already had exposure to, I was part of the medical student council, then I did graduation committee and med bull. I was always looking to do something outside of med school. So it's like I was getting bored. They could see that I had this itch that needed to be scratched. So they expected it for a long time, and it was almost natural. I think just around the time I got the job at Netcare, I was at a friend's engagement party, and all my friends are doctors, because that's all doctors spend time with doctors. And I remember we were sitting all just chatting, and I was saying, look, I might get this job at Netcare, and a friend of mine said to me, and he said it's in jest, but there's always that other undercurrent of truth. Chris, you're such a sellout going to private sector and going to corporate. You're just basically saying you're just selling out for the salary. And I remember thinking at the moment, and it hurt. It really did, because that wasn't at all the reason. I was definitely frustrated in public sector, but I've never ever wanted to leave healthcare. Healthcare has always been where my passion is. And it's not to say that being a doctor and not being a doctor, you can still make a difference in the clinical environment, but you're just working it from a different angle. And I think if my job didn't give me that sort of satisfaction, knowing that I'm changing healthcare, and I say it with a lot of pride, but modestly as well, to say that what we're doing really is just changing healthcare in South Africa. What we've done has never been done in South Africa before. We're one of a handful of hospitals in the world, or hospital groups in the world, to even do what we've done as well. So it's just incredible to say that we actually are changing the course of healthcare in South Africa forever. And that is making a difference. That's going to change how things work in public sector and in private sector. And we know that NHI will eventually go this route as well. NHI it's in the white paper as well, to say that digitization, electronic records, having a unique patient identifier, these are all things that we've already tackled now through our project. So we're laying that foundation for when it happens in public sector. And I hope I have the opportunity to go back to public sector and help with that when it does start. But I know that this is the way that I'll learn. I'll get the exposure, I'll get the skill set, that I can eventually take those skills back to public sector. Because that is my dream, to go back to public sector. I joined private sector. At the time I said to the CEO when he interviewed me, say, look, I'm only going to join Netcare for, maybe I'll join for 18 months, maybe 2.5 years, and then I'm definitely leaving. I'm not going to stay beyond that, because I just want to get a little bit, and I'm going to leave after. Chris, that's okay, join, and we'll see how things go. And honestly, now I can't see myself ever leaving Netcare. I absolutely love my job. I look forward to work every single day. And I'm very fortunate to have that. Not many people do have that. But it doesn't mean I've lost the hope of going back to public sector or making a difference in public sector. I'm hoping I can do it through my current job and through private sector. But my passion is still very much in serving our country.
And also, who knows, maybe that dream of becoming the CEO of Barra is not all lost. Maybe, maybe you might return as being the chief technology officer of Barra in the foreseeable future.
I think so.
So
IT's
Chris,
gonna, yeah.
no, you can go for it.
No, I was going to say, no, that's something that you're saying chief technology officer. I definitely don't think I'll become a CTO anyway, but I've become very heavy in IT, which is also unusual. Not many doctors end up in IT.
Yeah.
So I'm actually in the IT division of Netcare, which is, it's like, what is a doctor doing in IT? It's an unusual journey, but I couldn't be a better fit for anywhere else in the company. Because I have an affinity and a passion for technology. I have no qualifications in it, but I've now got a ton of experience through what I've done. So it's been a good fit, but yeah, I don't think I'll ever be CTO anywhere, but I think definitely technology in the future.
Okay.
So I just wanted to, I think we all can relate. You mentioned that you were part of grad ball and all of that when you were supposed to actually study. So I think all of us, we wanted to watch that season finale, and we started cleaning our rooms just before we started study. You always have all these other responsibilities before a big exam comes up. So we can actually relate to that. But Chris, just a question from my side. I think what we've seen is we help quite a lot of med students with that transition into their internship years. And we get the question quite often there, Stefan, do you have other clients that's in business? Hence, we've referred some of them to come and chat to you. And when did they make the move? So for the listener out there, when if you could do it over, what would be the best and quickest route if you pick up in your final year? Like as an example, I studied engineering, and in my final year, I knew I can't see myself in engineering for the rest of my life. So if there's a med student in their final year knowing, look, this is definitely not for me, what would be the quickest route? Would you recommend finishing internship, ComServe? Can they sort of skip that part and go directly into business? What's the way?
Yeah, so yet again, there's no one size fits all. It depends on each person. My personal recommendation, and I'm perhaps biased for various reasons, I'll add in those reasons, is to say do internship at least, do comm service, and then start doing other options. Or while you're in comm service or internship, start exploring other options, but still have that as your day job. And that was just, I guess, my risk aversion because I had a family or plans for a family, and I wanted to just make sure, okay, I had a stable job that I could always go back to, because medicine it's a stable job. You have fairly good job security when it comes to healthcare and being a doctor. So that was my reasoning. There are people that leave sooner. Generally, those that would leave sooner, they're at a point where they realize that medicine and healthcare isn't for them. If you're still passionate about healthcare, then definitely I would say do internship and ComServe, because that first-hand experience you get as an intern, as a ComServe, as a doctor is completely different to what you'd get if you didn't actually go into it. The exposure you get as a student is so minimal. You can't ever say you really got that for that frontline exposure. So if you want to get to a point where you can solve challenges in healthcare, at the very least, you need internship and ComServe to experience those challenges and to help to solve them. You can get an enormous amount more experience if you carry on down the road, and you'll get more of those challenges, but it just gives me enough of an insight to say, okay, these are the types of problems they experience. I don't have nearly enough insights, and I can't ever claim to understand all the challenges, but at least I've experienced some of it, so I know where the possible pain points might be and what we need to solve. So that'd be my recommendation, but it depends almost how eager are you to leave clinical medicine as a whole and medicine, or if you're still keen on healthcare, then go into internship and ComServe. Beyond that, then my recommendation is, what is the most efficient route almost to your end journey? And there's not one recipe. The analogy I always use is something that one of my coaches said to me when I was doing my MBA, is like, Chris, think about what your goal is. What is that goal, that objective you're trying to reach? What is that mountaintop you're trying to climb? So at the time, obviously, for me, it was still becoming CEO of Barra. So Chris, okay, at the top of the mountain, there's that goal of becoming CEO of Barra. Great, that's your goal. You now have a few options. You can either climb along the ridge and eventually climb up the mountaintop, go down through the valley, go through the marsh pits, go through the river. But all of these routes, no matter where you go, they're eventually going to get you to the top of that mountaintop. None of them are perfect, but none of them are bad either. Everything will add value along your journey. So I don't ever regret anything I've done. Maybe there's a more efficient way for me to have done it, maybe a quicker way for me to have gotten there. But for me, I'm very much of the belief that God has a plan for your life. I'm a bit more religious than maybe others. But there was a plan that played out, and it worked out in my favor. And each thing sort of added along to my journey as we went along. But yet again, no perfect recipe. But the goal is so important. So if you don't know what that mountaintop is, then you're walking around blindly. And identifying that goal is difficult. So for me, it was an easy one, because I was like, I'm aiming for that point. That goal's very quickly changed, and it became irrelevant quickly. but it was such an important goal to work towards. But actually just spend the time just to reflect. The first question is, I want to leave clinical medicine. How do I get out? Why do you want to leave clinical medicine? What's motivating you to leave? What are you getting out and what are you going towards? Once you identify your destination, even just loosely your destination, then you have something to work towards. You can say, okay, what are the possible routes to get there?
Yeah.
This might be the most efficient route. This might be inefficient, but I might enjoy the scenery along the way. And there'll be other things that add value to me as a person as I get there.
Yeah.
So there's lots of options, but identifying that destination, that goal is so critical before you even start on that journey.
So you went obviously the MBA route. If somebody and you mentioned, you actually alluded to the fact that you started a family, you were obviously, you had commitments. Somebody that doesn't necessarily want to go the MBA route because they have to continuously working, or can you do the jump without a second degree, or would you have to go the business school route?
Yeah, so look, you do an MBA part-time, but an MBA isn't always the answer. So an MBA is an easy answer, and a lot of people consider it, but there's almost a point where it's almost becoming a cliche to do an MBA if you're a doctor, because that's just like the easy option. But there's lots of other routes. So yes, it depends on your personal circumstances. I was fortunate. I was able to get funding to do an MBA, but if you don't have funding, MBAs are expensive. It's more than just the financial cost, the social costs, your psychological costs, on a family, on your personal circumstances. If you're single, no dependencies, no liabilities, cool. Jump on a plane, go overseas, go to school, take a year off. You can probably save enough during med school to make it feasible. But if you have the dependency, it makes it very, very, very difficult. So, yeah, it depends. Look at your options and see what's feasible. For me, I think what I almost say to everybody first is just try and dip your toe into something. Go say, even if you just go work and you volunteer with an NGO, volunteer with a startup, just get exposure to something that you might be interested in. What are you passionate about? Okay, cool, I enjoy technology. There's a ton of healthcare startups out there focused on technology. Just say, can I come just see what you guys do? Maybe even do some pro bono work for you, just get some exposure. Maybe that ends up becoming something that you enjoy. Or chat to people, have some conversations, see what people have done and what else you could be involved in. And it might lead to a job. And that's what happened to me. I was just having coffee chats to doctors that had left healthcare, and then a doctor offered me a job. So you never know where the doors might open.
Agree.
Just try.
Agree.
Chris, I want to talk a little bit about practice management, and specifically touching on the network side as well, which you've alluded to now, because you've had the experience in the corporate and business sector, and especially talking about Netcare, what you guys have done there. How did that help all of the doctors there from a practice management perspective? Did it help them quite significantly? Did it free up their hands a bit? If you could maybe just elaborate on that a bit.
Yeah, so yes and no. I think we haven't helped them enough yet, and we will certainly help them more in the future. We have a lot more work to do in the practice management space, and we talk about the outpatient sector, so their rooms. So everything we've done at the moment is focused on the inpatient sector. Okay. So there's a bit more work to do there. I think there's a few big challenges, and maybe the first is, doctors are notoriously bad at administration. Whether it be finances, whatever it may be, we're not the people to ask to do those kind of things, because all we care about is patients and the clinical work. And that's where practice management becomes difficult. So having a good PA or having good admin staff is often the only way your practice becomes successful. But there's things about billing. Nobody teaches even how to do ICD-10 coding. But unless you know how to do ICD-10 coding, you cannot get paid in private sector. No. But nobody ever trains you how to do it properly. So you maybe get a cheat sheet of these are your 30 codes, and that's what you bill for. But if you know how to code properly, you can make up to 33% more on your revenue just because you've added a modifier code or added a comorbidity. But something as small as that, we've realized very quickly, actually, our doctors have no clue how to code. Nobody's ever trained them. So now I've started an initiative to train all of our doctors for free on how to do better coding, because it actually will improve your billing. That also improves the data, because we use the coding to actually look at the data and monitor diagnoses, comorbidities, illnesses, outcomes, procedures. And the ICD-10 codes added an enormous amount of value, but if they're not being used correctly, you lose that value in the data. So there's various aspects. We haven't done enough yet in that space. It's hard for me to give advice because I've never worked in private sector such as a specialist. I only see it from our side within Netcare. Okay. And then obviously, I guess if you're working in government, it's completely different. You don't have to worry about it at all. You've got a salary coming in.
Yes,
yeah. But that's a valid point. I think we can do like a whole podcast literally just on that point, because I've never thought about that. Just literally the way you code could actually play an impact, have a massive impact on your
and
on
that,
your revenue.
that's something that we've talked about in the past, because I've seen that depending on which doctor you visit, some of them are quite innovative. You can see they started to gear their practice more digitalized. I've been to a cardiologist about 2 weeks ago because we've got some family history of heart disease. So I just went for a checkup while I'm still healthy and young, and I must say I was quite impressed by the way that this doctor conducted his practice. Because everything was digitalized. I received a link from an app which they use called Lockbox. You might be familiar with it. And I filled in everything, all of the paperwork that I normally go fill in, where you go sit in the room, you fill in everything in paper, you get your file, walk to the doctor with this big file. Everything was digitalized.
Wow.
So it was quite a nice experience. And we talked about it. And I said to Stefan that that's definitely something which I think can enhance your value proposition as a doctor and streamline your business. Because if you decide to specialize, and you're going into private, you are very much focused on clinical. And we've talked about this plenty of times in the past, where we say that your most successful doctors are not necessarily guys that's clinically the best, but it's guys that actually knows how to run their practices. By, for instance, using an example, coding or using those correct ICD codes could make a huge difference in your practice.
So I can spend hours and hours talking about change management technology for clinicians, because that's all we do. That's what my job is based here on change management and implementing technology for clinicians. A comment that we often get is, I'm a doctor, I don't have time to use an iPad or do admin or do that. Yes, you are a doctor, but you're also running a business. Your practice is a business.
Correct.
You are a clinician, but if you don't run your business well, you're not going to be successful. And rather than trying to, I guess, learn those skills and solve for it, no, let me just outsource. I'll get somebody else to do it for me. My PA will do it. I'll outsource my billing. And that's fine. That works for some people. But it doesn't mean you should just neglect that completely, because there's still, you need to have some insight into just to make sure things are happening correctly. Maybe somebody could be siphoning off money. We've seen this happen often, where PAs or staff or admin staff are taking off a little bit off the top, just skimming a little bit. Doctors just don't know better because they're not that close to it. So just having a little bit of insight into it just helps you to run your practice better. And there's lots of opportunity for technology to help that process as well. Many of our doctors are in their 50s, 60s, 70s, and technology is still very foreign to them. But the sooner you can adopt technology and incorporate it into your practice, the sooner you can reap those benefits and gain those efficiencies. There's a lot of products out there, a lot of work that's been done in the space already. There's a lot of efficiency you can gain just by using what's out there.
Okay. Chris, thank you so much. I've learned a lot from this episode. I think my last question to you is just, if you could do it all over again, and you touched on it early in the podcast, but if you can do it all over again, what would you do differently?
Nothing. I'm very happy with my journey. I think I look back now and I can see the value of each step that I took. So I did the MBA, came out of the MBA, I'm ready to go and work. I did the second master's almost unplanned. I was fortunate enough to get a scholarship, so I'm not going to say no to a free degree. Did the second master's, and I almost haven't used the second master's at all in my current work environment, at least not directly that I'm aware of, but it still added enormous value to my journey. So it doesn't mean I discount it in any way. So yes, maybe there's a more efficient way to do it, but I'm thoroughly happy with my journey and how I got here.
Thank you so much. So if you've watched this episode and you enjoyed it, please feel free to share this with friends and colleagues that you know is not going to stay in the clinical side of things for too long. They've been talking about making a move to the business side. And please also subscribe to our channel, comment in the box below, and go check out some of the other episodes that we did. I also want you to check out these 2 episodes that we did, which is some of the content that we share free of charge. You can visit our website where we share tools, again, free of charge, that you can just use for the benefit of improving in terms of your financial portfolio. And until next time, plan the plan.
This episode of Money and Medicine is proudly sponsored by the PPS Health Professions Indemnity.